We've had a lot of comments on our YouTube channel asking about the browser extensions I use. A lot of these are useful both for hacking and for OSINT investigations, and today we'll break down 10 categories of my favorite browser extensions on this episode of Cyber Weapons Lab. For hackers or OSINT researchers, it's essential to be able to control your browser. This means being able to pull more information out of websites, like clues about EXIF data or location information, and also be able to control what your browser puts out, which could be identifying information that tips off the person you're looking into. Now, this functionality can be expanded with browser extensions, both for Firefox and Chrome, and this allows us to pick and choose what we want to do with our browser rather than just going with the default settings. Now, there are different ways of doing this, and the most private way is to create a virtual machine and then within that have a browser with a bunch of different extensions in order to make sure your system isn't leaking information. Now, the best operating system I've found for this is Buscador OS, so it's one of the ones we'll be covering today. However, the majority of the extensions that are available in that are also available in your normal everyday browser. Now, because we've gotten a lot of questions about this in the YouTube show, I'm going to break this down into 10 categories and go through why I think each one is valuable and how it can help even either an investigator or a hacker who's looking to use their browser in some interesting ways. Now, this will range everything from forensic investigation tools that allow us to go back into the history of a website or copy it so that we have a forensic record, all the way into doing things like maybe getting a different version of a website by spoofing our user agent and pretending that we are a device that we're not. Now, in order to follow along with this, you'll just need a browser and an internet connection. So as soon as you have both of those ready, then we're ready to begin. Now, I wanted to break this down into 10 useful categories that will work across not just Chrome, but also Firefox and other browsers you might be using. Now, these are kind of general categories, but I will show you some specific examples, and we'll take a look at different ways that we can use them, aside from just adding them to your existing browser. Now, the first I want to point out, and probably the most secure, is to download a virtual machine that already has these set up. And one of my favorites is Buscador OS, which you can find on the Intel Techniques website. Now, Mike Bazell is really awesome about having these pre-installed and allows us to just kind of run this a virtual machine and then have all the benefit of having it set up by an expert. And it includes not only custom scripts that he wrote, but also some generally useful browser extensions that collect forensic evidence and assist during OSINT investigations. Now, for a hacker, this is perfect because it not only protects your anonymity by allowing easy access to tools like Tor, it also allows you to have all these things plugged in a disposable format so you can just spin up an operating system, do whatever you need, and then destroy the virtual machine when you're done with it. Now, if you don't want to do that, let's step through a couple different things we can do in order to make this process of using a browser more interesting and more secure. And the first thing starts with controlling the input and output of the browser. Now, what I mean by that is the browser input is the way that a website will be rendered. And we can control this by maybe requesting a different version of the website. Let's go to the Pasadena Humane Society. And we can see that if we change our user agent, it will actually sometimes render us a different version of the website. Now, I don't know if it will with this. Looks like it's not too reactive. But if we were to go to something like Reddit, and then this is the normal site, refresh it, we should start to see some subtle differences when we start to go to a mobile device. Yep, and a tablet and stuff like that. So the reason for that is because when we're sending out a request, we're also including information about our browser, and we can get different responses based on the way that we're presenting ourselves. So by controlling the way our browser is expressing itself to the server and saying basically what it is and what kind of information it needs to properly display the website, we can influence what comes back. And this is useful for example, maybe bypassing a paywall on an article or news website where they allow things like a Bing spider, which indexes things for search results, to go through when they would otherwise kind of bar general user agents from getting in. So if I set this to Google Spider, then a lot of the time it will allow us to get into things that normally would not be accessible. Although in this case, it looks like the opposite because Reddit's trying not to be indexed in that way. So, all right, let's take a look at the various things we can do with the browser. And the first thing is, when we're talking about output, preventing ourselves from being tracked as we go to various websites with tools like uBlock Origin and Privacy Badger. Now, these privacy-focused tools keep an eye on the requests that are going out and also mitigate some of the technologies that we covered with tools like Canary tokens or Grabify that allow us to track people who go to certain links. While this can't prevent you from being tracked over absolutely everything, and there are some other technologies and techniques out there to identify you, these are a good first step to prevent unnecessary tracking from the websites you visit, and will not only tell you about the different advertisers and links that are being blocked, but also give the ability to turn this off if it is really breaking a particular website you need to have working. Now, all right, let's say we're an investigator and we want to see an earlier version of this website or some other website. Let's go to PBS Kids. That sounds fun. All right, so if we go to this website, we might want to see an earlier version of this. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off our user agent spoofer so it doesn't render a weird version. And if I wanted to see what this website looked previously, maybe the owners of the website had put up some more personal information and then realized they should take it down later or something like that. We can go back in time with extensions that allow us access to services like the Internet Archive or other archived versions of the website. Now, the Internet Archive allows us to go back and find specific instances of where this has been archived. And we can see all the way back to 2004, there are some versions of the website that are apparently archived. And here we go, we can see a really super old version of PBS Kids all the way back from 2004. So because this might include some interesting information, maybe about the organization of PBS back then, who was in charge, that might not be available on the current internet, we have access to previous versions of the internet right from your browser. Now, I think this is really cool, and there's versions for both Firefox and Chrome. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, you can go ahead and find it both in Firefox and in Chrome as extensions and add-ons. Now, the next thing I want to go over is EXIF data. And there are some extensions that allow you to pull this information so that you can find out maybe where a photo was taken, or if a particular person is using a type of equipment that's easily identifiable. Now, this is just a photo bucket random feed, and I have no idea what these were taken on or where they were taken. But if we just click on this and then see the raw photo, in general, these extensions allow us to begin pulling more information from the raw image file that can identify maybe where it was taken or what it was taken with. Now, if I click on Show EXIF Data, I can see from this random picture, we just see a little bit of color information. So if we, let's see, click on Recent Uploads, let's see if we can find a photo with some EXIF data as an example. Maybe a little further on. So here I'm going to click on this picture of an aircraft, and if I right mouse click and then show EXIF data, then I can see that this was shot with a Fuji FinePix S5000, which is pretty incredible because I can also see it was shot in 2009, so this is an old picture. I can see the exact exposure time, f-stop, and all the other information of the camera when it was taken. And this and other information can allow me to, see, it even comes with a photo of the camera, can allow me to identify things like maybe who took it or where it was taken, although we don't have GPS information in this specific instance. Now, the next thing that I'm going to cover is a technology profiler. So if I wanted to assess an organization to see how tech savvy they are, a lot of it comes down to what technology they're using to create and maintain their website. Now, very small organizations might use preset tools or really cheap free options like WordPress or something like that, or Wix, or one of those site builders. Whereas a more well-funded organization might have custom infrastructure and use more kind of niche providers. So if you want to find that out, we can use an extension like BuiltWith. Now, built with is also a tool that allows us kind of command line abilities, and we can even use it in something else like Maltego, although I find it especially useful if we want to just do a drive-by on a website and find out exactly what they're using. We can see all the analytics and tracking they're using, and then the underlying technology that's allowing the website to function. So here you can see analytics and tracking, frameworks. We can see they're using Ruby on Rails, JavaScript libraries they're using, jQuery. We can see their web hosting providers, Amazon. They're using Apache. This is a lot of information. And again, this is just from a browser extension. We can go to any website and see the underlying technology that's running it just by clicking on this little link. So for somebody who's looking at either infrastructure to attack, or we want to just look and see, is this a big business or a small business? This is useful for just about everyone, in my opinion. Now, the next up is a video downloader. And this can be either for archiving a bunch of videos offline, preserving forensic evidence, or otherwise making sure you have a copy of something that might otherwise be taken down. Now, there are a variety of different tools for this, but this one in particular, the one-click video downloader, is a really good way to use a variety of different tools to download videos that might be of interest in an investigation or a pen testing kind of engagement. Now, we aren't on a website with videos right now, but if we were to go to something like YouTube and allow it to load, then we should get the option to bulk download videos if there's multiple ones available, or otherwise be able to retain them. Now, that's pretty useful, and I can see that it doesn't allow us specifically to do from YouTube, but there's a lot of other videos you can download with it, so I recommend these sorts of extensions if you want to be able to back up videos that you find online. So next up is being able to access SSH devices. Now, I've covered this before, but I wanted to throw it in because if you're just on some random computer in a library or something and you want to access your Raspberry Pi, you can just SSH into it using this SSH extension. Now, it's called the Secure Shell extension, and you can just SSH root at 192.168.0.9. Probably not. But as you can see, it does a good attempt, and all of a sudden we are in a shell attempting to connect to some other SSH device on the network without even needing to install anything fancy. So if you just happen to have access to a computer with Chrome, you can just slap on this extension and then start logging into random devices on the network, whether or not you have actually access to a command line at all. So that's super, super cool. Now, if you have a computer and you want to mix in the traffic that you're actually using with a bunch of random stuff, so it's more difficult for an internet service provider or anyone else for that matter to start building a profile on you, one way of doing that is using chaff. Now you can just click on chaff and it'll start navigating to random different websites, which is a way of just introducing a bunch of white noise and kind of throwing a bunch of websites into the mix that you didn't really download. And it's generally also very good about not going to anything too outrageous or something that, would get you into trouble. Now, chaff is a way that you can introduce enough noise that it throws off statistical models of maybe what you're interested in and makes the information less valuable and less useful for advertisers and other people trying to track you in automated ways. Now, finally, we're going to go into capturing data. And one key way of doing that is being able to download an entire web page so you have access to it maybe if the person decides to take it down or otherwise make it not available. Now, I'm going to step into our Buscador OS because there's more ways of doing that here than anything else that I've seen. And within the browser extensions that they include in Firefox, one of my favorite is Nimbus Capture, Video Download Helper, as we covered before, and then Fireshot Capture. Now, if we want to capture something like this website here, we can either choose the visible part of the page, a fragment, the selected area, or the entire page. And we can even add annotations and then add it to a cloud account, which is super cool if we're looking for evidence or we're maybe scanning for, I don't know, like a vulnerability in a website and we want to share amongst team members. Now, we can also see Fireshot is a way of doing that too. I believe for this one, we can just right mouse click to use it. Both of them actually. So if we want to do Fireshot, we can right mouse click it, capture the entire page, and often this will output to a PNG or something like that that's really, really easy to take notes on and share between teams. So finally, on my actual browser, a lot of the times I'll want to take advantage of something like an API. And APIs can return back JSON data, which is not very nice to look at and can be really annoying. So I like to format my data with things like pretty JSON or other tools that allow me to make queries to JSON data sources. And the nice thing about this sort of thing is it allows us to directly access APIs and start querying data in a way that is useful. So you might ask, well, what's the purpose of this? And one of them is data.gov, which has tons and tons and tons of information that you can build into programs and other sorts of queries. And knowing how to query that data is a powerful way of doing OSINT investigations when you find yourself facing access to a rich source of information that only comes back in JSON. So here's some voter registration data. You can see this initial view is not particularly pleasing to look at, but I think after this exhausting amount of JSON data loads, I should be able to format it a little more nicely. Let's see. There we go. And this is the way that the data will be formatted to look a little bit more nice. And this one's called Awesome JSON. So these are different tools you can use to expand the experience of using a browser. And I'm going to throw in a couple extra just because I want to, and there are some additional things out there. If you're having trouble loading websites, you also can include browser extensions to block images, which means they'll load faster. And honestly, if you don't need the images, or if they're just a bunch of advertisements, or if you're on low bandwidth, this can increase what you can do. I also recommend using tools like Grammarly to hide any spelling mistakes you might make persistently, because those sorts of things can identify you if you do them all the time. So catching your own mistakes is an important part of staying anonymous. Finally, I highly recommend a password manager like LastPass, or something that allows you to use secure passwords across your accounts. Because otherwise you're going to pick passwords that are really difficult to remember or are too easy to remember because they're too easy. And it can be easy to have your accounts compromised because you have no real system of being able to keep track of secure passwords. LastPass and other different password managers will allow you to generate secure passwords and also do things like keep track of master passwords so that you don't need to keep all of them kind of memorized. And that encourages people to use stronger passwords across their accounts, which again is kind of the point of all this. All these together will allow any hackers or people with privacy in mind to be able to use browsers to better effect and for whatever it is they want to do. Browser extensions allow you to expand the functionality of any browser you might happen to be using. Although if you are concerned about your privacy, I recommend using a virtual machine like Buscador OS in VirtualBox to create a virtualized version of your operating system instead. This means that you might not leak details about your operating system that otherwise could slip through, and will provide you an extra layer of anonymity if you want to truly remain private. If you have any more questions, you can check out inteltechniques.com for more information about Buscador OS, or check out the Null Byte article linked in the description. That's all we have for this episode of Cyber Weapons Lab. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any thoughts or ideas for future episodes, send me a message on Twitter, because I'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.